Shalom, my brave, courageous, and intellectually honest friends. You're welcome to the third part of our ongoing teaching, which we entitled Blueprints to Redemption and Transcendence, or for short, we could simply say Blueprints to Transcendence. Like I promised, that we're going to take off from where we ended in part two. So, this is the third part. And before we begin, I would like us to pray. Holy Father, I pray for all those that are listening, that as they listen, may your inspiration pour down from heaven. May energy, may life, may revitalization, may peace, may healing, may favor pour down from heaven. And may you make your face to shine upon everyone that is listening as my voice, as the sound of my voice reaches their ears. I pray for you that are listening now, wherever you're listening, on your mobile device, or wherever. I pray that may you receive special inspiration. May the eyes of your understanding be filled and flooded with light. May you receive healing. May your eyes be open to see things that hitherto you could not see, that will bring practical and real solutions to issues that you're facing in your life and answer questions and solve perplexing paradoxes and dilemmas in your life. I pray that may the peace of Adonai rest on you as you listen. May his power, may his glorious power come upon you and empower you and strengthen you and heal you and bless you. And may his favor be upon you, and may you receive inspiration and ideas from heavens as you listen. Be blessed in the name of Yeshua. Amen. Okay, so let's begin. I want to make a few comments about some things we said in the last teaching. And before we move right on to the things that I want us to discuss today, and at the tail, which will be taken off at the tail of where we ended in the last teaching. In the previous teaching, I said some pretty remarkable things, and I'm happy that a lot of you found meaning. A lot of you were blessed. Most of you, at least a third of the people who listen to the podcast. How do I know the number of people who would listen? By the way, I was filled with joy as I watched the download numbers continue to soar in dozens and dozens, which I imagine that it must be that some of you who listened and found value in the teaching, shared it with your friends, and so that they too could be blessed and inspired. And that was really commendable of you to do that, to share it. And I'm glad you did. And I'm thankful to God you did. And God bless you for doing that. I hope you also do that with this teaching today. And I hope that the teaching of today should not turn out to be an anticlimax, but rather it should just keep going upward and forward in terms of its inspiration and its power to influence and transform and impart your life. So I said some pretty remarkable things in last class, which I knew how remarkable they were, but I wasn't sure how many of you would see the power or the profoundness of some statements I made. However, as I got from the feedback that most of you sent, and one of the questions I asked some of you when we talked, asked that what was your main takeaway, what was your main highlight, the thing that stood out to you. And to my great joy, some of you really caught on to the profound statements that I said in passing. And I said it with some form of reservation, knowing how deep and profound and to an extent complicated it is, but I just said it like it was nothing. I was really hoping that at least some of you will catch on, and you did. You did. And that is what makes me do what I do. I share these things with you. That's why I call you brave and courageous people. It's not because it gives me the motivation when I see that you find value in these things and you have the aptitude, the capacity to understand the things I'm sharing. It gives me more encouragement to do it again and again. So we talked about how at the tail of the previous segment, we talked about how the pharaohs was owning all the land, and I mentioned that the pharaoh in Egypt literally abolished private ownership of land. We talked about that. Did you know that over 50% of the land in America, over 50% of land, the American land, is owned by the American government? You don't you probably don't understand how huge that is. America is a very huge continent. It's a very huge country in terms of land mass, and over 50% of the land is owned by the government. Some of you might not be educated in this kind of stuff to know what that means, and to know whether it is a good thing or a bad thing, or even if you know that it might be bad, you might not be educated in this kind of stuff enough to know the consequences or how bad it is. Now, why am I only mentioning the stats about America? It's because it's very hard to get statistics about things here in Africa. I don't know how much percentage of land, for example, my country, Cameroon, is owned by the government, but I can guess that is pretty much, it's pretty huge. And the American government under Obama took a project to buy huge landmass from the citizens. I mean, huge purchases by the government. The government keeps purchasing land from the citizens. Now, you think about it, is weird because the government, who is the government? And the government doesn't have money of its own. Majority of the government funding comes from the productive work of citizens who pay taxes. And so it's like I take your money and I buy your property. It's that kind of stuff. And we, most of us, think about taxes and taxation. We think that taxation is something that has always been part of the human reality or the reality of nations. But taxation is relatively new. Or however, nation states, the existence of nation states is not new, or city states. And states in ancient times relatively ran without the heavy burdens of taxations that we have today, unless when a state, taxation was one of the tools that were used by dictators and sovereign governments to subject and enslave their people. And we can find that in ancient Egypt. The same thing happened. The pharaohs used heavy taxation. And even in the time of the Romans severely taxed the people. The Romans, when they occupied Israel, they occupied Jerusalem and they were ruling. But Roman citizens had a limited burden of the tax than non-citizens. So the Jews, who were non-citizens, paid tremendous taxes to the Roman government. And that, if you can read in the New Testament, or what we popularly call the New Testament, you would see that a lot of the issues that the Jews had when it comes to the Roman government was the issue of taxation. I'll give you an example. When Yeshua met his disciples, or they were yet to be his disciples, he met Peter and his brothers. They were fishing, and he asked them that, how much fish have you caught? And they said they've been fishing all night and they've caught nothing. And Yeshua tells them to drop their net on the other side. What you might not know is that fishermen, as a fisherman, when you go to fish, back then the Roman government, you pay a tax to the Roman authority for that day, and the tax gave you authority to fish only in a particular segment of the river. So if you paid a certain amount of tax, that tax only permitted you to catch fish on a particular section, means you cannot move to any other section if fish was not available in this section. And that's how taxation was horrible back then. And that was the part of the oppressive machine of the Romans in subjugating the Jews. See, and another example was Yeshua said that if somebody asks you to go a mile, you should go 2 miles. Under Roman law, a Roman official could ask a Jew or Hebrew to go to carry his luggage for a mile, and it was legal. And if you refused, you could be jailed, and you could be beaten severely, and your money could be taken, or whatever you had could be taken. So it was in that context that Yeshua said, well, the Romans have made it that it is obligatory that if a Roman official asked you as a Jew to carry his luggage for a mile, you got to carry it. Yeshua said, don't just go a mile, go 2 miles. And there was a reason for that. But that is not what we are discussing at this moment. So let's just keep on. I was saying this to tell you that part of the machine of the enslaving the masses has to do with taxation. And when it comes to taxation is not all bad. Scriptures do give allowance for taxation, and there is a quota. I think, scripturally speaking, the amount that a king or a leader or a government should tax its citizens should not be more than 20%. But believe it or not, citizens have paid income taxes up unto 90% of their income of their work. And the parallel strikes with ancient times when pharaohs and despotic kings or an invading nation seeks to enslave the people of a nation that has been captured. So 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 we have taxation, we have government owning a lot of properties and all that and stuff. And why am I telling you this? I'm not trying to build an anti-government sentiment in you. What I'm trying to get you to understand is that there is a something going on in the world to enslave the masses, to enslave as many people as possible. But you ask me that why would anyone want to do that? Is it a coordinated effort? Is it a group of people? And then we start bothering around conspiracy theories that maybe there's some shadow organizations or deep state or Illuminati called or Freemasonic cults that are a group of oligarchs that want to enslave the world and rule as kings. No, that's not where we are going. What I want you to know is that it is a matter of fact that there is a machine, a global machine, a political machine, a social engineering that is going on all over the world to enslave people, to make people slaves to a human government. And like we saw in the previous teaching, that part of what it means to be in Egypt is to be under the rule of man. And the reality is that you cannot be your own self person. You're going to have to serve someone at some point. And you cannot serve two masters at the same time. So you're either going to serve man or you're going to serve your creator. You're either going to be under the rule of man or you're either going to be under the rule of your maker. And you choose which one is fair to you. You choose which one is good to you. But you got to choose. And if you don't choose by default, you fall under the rule of man. And so this message is so timely in the sense that the rulers of Olam Hazer, we talked that Olam Hazer, like we saw in the last teaching, is this world, this present world, and the present world order ruled by men and the wisdom of men. The rulers of Olam Hazer are building a machine, social engineering, to enslave the masses. And some of you that have been following my teachings for a couple of years now know how I've talked about this, drawing inspiration from the story of Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel. I think I spoke about this in the podcast I did earlier this year with respect to the coronavirus. However, when we say this message, when we title this message, as the blueprint to redemption and transcendence. By redemption, I mean that I'm going to show you how to break free from the control, from the social engineering, from the mind programming, from the psychological conditioning of the machine. When I say machine, it's not, I hope you understand how I am using this word in the context of this teaching. So by redemption, I mean I'm going to show you the tools, both the physical and the spiritual tools, to break free from the control of the machine, the social conditioning and the mind programming of that machine. And by transcendence, I mean that I will show you how to live above them, how to live above their machinations, how to live above their entrapments, and how to live above the thumb of their tyranny, to live above their economic control, to live above their economic, political, uh, education, and social control. And there is a way to go about it, and it has to be a deliberate action. It doesn't happen by default, it doesn't happen on its own. It has to be something you choose and pursue to be free in this sense. And that is what I mean by transcendence, transcending this world, this world's order, transcending this world's, the slave machine of this world, that in spite of their juggernauts of slavery, you can thrive, you can prosper, you can live as the person that Hashem created you to be, and you can serve God and not man. You see, personally, I'm a very proud person. Proud in the sense that I hold so much, I hold my life in so much high esteem. I hold my life, I think my highest value is my life, and I hold it in so high an esteem that I cannot and would not accept that my life should be, the purpose of my life should be to serve the agenda of man, no matter who that man is, no matter who that woman is. I think it's like this. For example, imagine that you have a very expensive dress that you bought out of money you'd been saving or worked pretty hard for, and you keep this dress that you only wear it for special occasions. Or should I use another example? Let's say you have a wine, a 25-year-old wine that you bought very expensive out of money that you save and work so hard for, and you've been keeping this wine for a very special occasion. And then a wine bibber who doesn't mean anything to you, you don't have any special relationship with, and just enters and take the wine to uncork it and just feel their wine thirst or their thirst for alcohol. Somebody who doesn't care whether it's beer or it's wine or anything else. You see, that is an abuse of the value that you place on that wine, and it's something you cannot allow. So I think that it will be the highest desecration of my life to submit it to serve the agenda of men, to be a slave to the ways and the servitudes of men, to be a slave or be in servitude to the machinations of a mere human being with only dust and mud. So it is this pride, it is this self-worth that I have for myself as a divine being created in the image and the likeness of Hashem, that makes me to be cantankerously, to be vehemently rebellious to the systems that tries to enslave me in any way, to enslave my mind, to enslave my emotions, and to enslave my work. I want to live for the highest purpose possible, for the highest ideal that my life can attain. Okay, so this is what this means to me as a person. You have to decide what redemption and transcendence means to you, whether it's something important for you to be free from the control and the rule of man and the rule of their systems, and to live above those systems. You got to decide for yourself if it is something that it's of value to you. Thomas Sowell Thomas Sowell wrote a book known as The Vision of the Anointed. The subtitles Self-Congratulation as the Basis for Social Policy. And in the book, he critiques the failed social policies of the past 30 years of the so-called anointed, or the intellectuals or leaders of the world, and he said these things have not happened as isolated mistakes, but as consequence of a united vision, or the united visions of the so-called the anointed. Now, Thomas Sowell is not a pastor, is not a clergy, so when he calls the word anointed, he's not saying it in a religious sense. So so we have all these anointed political leaders, leaders of global organizations and so on, who have a vision to shape the world in a certain image. And it is the consequences of their vision that has brought, as according to Thomas Sowell, crisis in education, crime, changes, destructive changes in the family dynamics of the world, and other social pathologies on the world. Okay, why am I telling you this? So when you realize what is going on in the world, the obvious question you got that obviously comes to your mind is, why would some people think that they are so highly anointed or highly great or so elevated that it is their birthright or whatever they think it is to rule over all people, to use these people to build empires to their ego, and to even enslave these people, even it means forcing these people and coercing these people and enslaving them to use them to build empires for their ego, like it happened in ancient Egypt. Like we said, that Egypt said to build a massive army, and as a result, the Israelites were forced to become slaves for Egypt's imperial ambitions. We looked into this last week, and we saw how the plan worked. It actually worked, and it always does. This plan always does. Because unless, as I said, unless you've deliberately given yourself into God's hand and deliberately chosen to serve God, to follow the vision and the design of God for your life, by default, you are susceptible and vulnerable to become a slave to man, to another man who would want to rule over you, to another human being who wants to rule. Because human beings are like, I would say, like a violin, that for it to produce sound, it needs someone to play it. And for life to be meaningful in any way, or even let me not say meaningful, for life, for a human being to live what is called life, he needs a player, without which life is not possible in a sense. And even people who call themselves anarchists, means people who believe they don't have to live by the rule of anybody, uh, that I am my own person. You know the illusion, and let me go by the way to say something here, that sometimes a lot of us think that we say, I am my own person, I live for myself, I don't care to please anybody, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. So the idea is that you own yourself. The truth is, you don't really own yourself, because if you, I give you an example, if you really thought you own yourself, why can't you just wake up one morning and say, oh, I have this bad habit, I'm stopping it today, and you just stop it? Or some of us who procrastinate, and you say, I'll do this. In other words, you see that even you as a human being, there are battles and things that you fight and you struggle with, to within yourself. See, almost like there are two forces within you. My point is that even when we think we are independent creatures, we are not serving the agenda of any man. If you have a scriptural worldview, you also see that there are spiritual and supernatural entities which are called demons. I talked about what demons are, because I, I know a lot of us don't have a good understanding or a biblical understanding of what really demons are. I spoke about this in the previous podcast that I did about the coronavirus earlier this year. And so even when we think we are anarchists, we don't submit to any man, and we don't believe in that myth called God, we are still serving the agenda of spiritual entities. So you must serve, you're a violin that must be played. And if you're producing sound, the sound is not self-originating. Don't think that the sound is your own origination. The sound that it's coming out of your life is being played by someone. So at some point you got to stop and ask, who is producing this sound, who is initiating this sound that is coming out from my life. I think that is what is known as attempting to live an examined life. I think I've spoken about this in a certain lecture where did say we got to live an examined life. The Apostle Paul, and I took inspiration from something the Apostle Paul said, to live not as fools, but to live deliberately. So so I said the plan always works, right? The plan to enslave mankind always works. You cannot enslave people who truly know God, who truly following the design of God for their lives. And you must understand that I'm not using these terms in your common religious sense. When I say someone knows God, someone is following God's design for your life, I'm not saying that the choir boy, the usher in church, the one that sings, and I'm not equating following God's design for your life to churchiness. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not equating knowing God to churchiness. Okay? So you got to have that distinction in your mind. So unless redemption and transcendence, we are perpetually condemned to be slaves to human beings or to demonic dark entities. So even the so-called rulers who believe to be on top of the hierarchy, on top of the pyramid of human evolution, and that the burden has fallen on them to rule the rest of mankind at the base. And these are the people that Thomas Sowell called the anointed and their visions. Even these people are slaves and deluded and blinded and deceived by very powerful dark entities in the spiritual world. And this is something I hope we might actually have the opportunity to get into. I tremble sometimes, not tremble like in a negative way. Like I shudder sometimes to want to get into this very high advanced esoteric stuff about the supernatural world. That the world is not just what we think, our simplistic understanding of the world or our material understanding of the world. It's a very primitive and shallow understanding, especially when we start seeing behind the curtain of the physical world and see into the spiritual world. You see, the world is amazing, it's sophisticated, things don't happen randomly. There's no randomness, there's no coincidence in this world. Everything happens by design. So the economic, and the social and the religious anointed of the world who are building pyramids for themselves at the expense of the slave labor of blind sheep of people. And I just added one thing here known as the religious anointed. Is there are mega churchy people. Now this one now I'm talking about the churchy ones who are building mega ministries on the backs of blind sheeps. Now this is not what I want to get into, so I'll just keep that. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know. So we said the new Egyptian army combined with the slave labor of the Hebrews enabled Egypt to become a major player in the world. Look at Dubai, for example. A lot of people are impressed by Dubai and China. China. If you want to know a great nation, if you want to know a great country, don't be one of the people who say, oh, this country has the tallest building in the world. It has the most developed city. And when you say developed, you talk in terms of its technology and infrastructure. Don't be that bland. You got to be able to think clearly. A great nation. Why is okay? There is only one civilization in the world today, and it's Western civilization. There are over 5,000 cultures in the world, but only one of those culture is civilization, and that's Western civilization, which is built on the back of Judeo-Christian ethics and morals, or Judeo-Christian culture. And Western civilization is the only civilization in the world today. You might say, is China not a civilization? You see that China is only becoming what it is by copying a lot of the values of Western civilization, and to the extent it has, to the extent it is becoming a civilization. What is a civilization? A civilization, a Western civilization, is the only civilization to exist in the history of man that has brought more people out of abject poverty, brought more people out of poverty, brought dignity for women and children, brought economic opportunity like nothing that has ever existed on the history of the world, and freedom, individual freedom for human beings. The Western civilization is the only civilization in the history of man that has done that for more people than any other culture that has ever existed. This is tremendously important because if you go to countries like Dubai, China, you would say these are great countries with great technological capabilities and so on. But what you discover is that majority of the citizens, a huge chunk of the citizens, live in abject poverty. Now, this is something in America, that poverty, the world today is more rich than ever before due to the influence of civilization, Western civilization. Less people die from the hands of another human being today than any other time they have ever been in history. I know you say, no, there are a lot of murders, there are a lot of wars, but it's even as it is less than it has been at any other time in history, that people die, less people die at the hands, are being murdered by other human beings, less nowadays than in any other time in history, due to civilization that has brought the law, the rule of the law. It's part of the characteristics of civilization, the rule of the law, not the rule of a king whom at his displeasure he looks at you and declares you dead. Just because he's not pleased with you, he's not happy with you. There's no process of law. And if you look at countries that are uncivilized, sadly, like my country, for example, a police officer could just kill you like that, and there's no law to protect you. There's no law, there's no due process. A police officer is the judge, jury, and executioner. A government official has limitless power. He has so much power over life and death. He's above the law. He is the law. The government decides what is right and what is wrong, and the leaders decide what is wrong. And this is the characteristics of a primitive, of a barbaric culture. A civilization, I'm not saying civilization is perfect. I'm not saying Western civilization is perfect. I'm saying that to a greater extent than any other culture existing today and in history, Western civilization has brought all these values. And you might condemn Western civilization for all that is bad. I'm watching the documentary Borderless, and you see the trouble people go through to enter the West, to benefit from Western civilization. How many times have you seen people dying in boats trying to get into Nigeria, trying to get into Equatorial Guinea, trying to get into Cameroon? How many times? How does Cameroon have a immigration problem, or migration problems? That's people trying to immigrate into Cameroon, Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea. We don't have those problems. Nobody wants to come here. People want to come, but not going through the trouble people will go through to enter with the civilization. Because human beings are built to live in civilization. This is what we are built for. We are not built to be slaves to man. So if you go to Dubai, China, and so on, you see there's a lot of abject poverty. Now in America, this is what I wanted to say before I think I diverted and I started saying something else. Back in ancient times, when you said someone was poor, poverty in the ancient times is different from poverty in civilization today. Now we still have the ancient kind of poverty in most yet to be civilized nations, but Western civilization has almost, to a very great extent, as a matter of fact, it's actually a miracle if you think of it, have overcome poverty, abject poverty. Back in ancient times, when someone was poor, is that the person doesn't have food and the person doesn't have clothes to protect his body from the elements and doesn't have shelter to protect himself also from people who seek to kill him. That's a house, because a house in ancient times did not just serve like a roof that you cover yourself. It protected you from people who want to kill you, from wild animals and so on. But today in civilization, when you say someone is poor in Western civilization, it's not in this kind of sense that the person lacks clothes to protect them from the elements, and the person lacks food to eat, and the person lacks shelter, a home. I know you say there are people living in the streets in Western civilization, and the heart of Western civilization being America. There are a lot of people living in the streets, and there are a lot of people starving. It's true that these things are happening, but most of the people who live in the streets in Western civilization, most people who are poor, and when I say most, I'm talking 9 out of 10 in Western civilization, is not because it's due to many other factors like behavioral factors, addictions, and so many other things, and psychological issues, than it is economic constraints or economic lack of economic opportunities. Anybody in America can be free from abject poverty if they want to. And even those in most states in the heart of Western civilization, being America, the government, there's such a thing as food stamps. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of the welfare state. The food stamps and housing, government providing housing for street people, and so many unemployed allowances, unemployment allowances, and all these things. This is what civilization means. A lot of us are not aware of the horrors of China. I have a friend that is Chinese. Actually, she's from Hong Kong, and she loves China for all its good and bad. And I think she's biased, though she tends to look only at the good and ignore the bad. And she's kind of an apologist for China, and she always sends me these videos and these links and so on to make a case that China is not as bad as the West is trying to make China out to be. Anyway, I think I've diverted and gone so far out. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to let me try to find my train of thought. Let me go right back because I've gotten so far out. But the point I was trying to make in this discussion that we just took out here was to let you understand that don't just look at a country with the tallest building in the world, the biggest mall in the world, and all that stuff and say it's a great country. It's just like you could look at a family that has the biggest house in the neighborhood. They have German shepherds and wonderful dogs, and they have expensive cars, and their lives look so amazing. And you say, wow, that's a great family. But you go in that home, there is turmoil, the children are drug addicts, and it is as dysfunction as a family can be, as any dysfunctional family can be. And then some of the children even are starving to death because the father would rather look good outside than spend money on his children. And what I'm saying is not far-fetched, it's real things that happen. Okay, so you must be able to make value judgments, and that is one of the things in Genesis. When God created, he looked at it and said it is good. One of the abilities, what it means for us to be created in the image and likeness of God, is that God has given us the ability to make value judgments, to be able to differentiate between what is truly good from what is not. Okay, so let me go right back and find my train of thought, what I was talking about. It's okay. We're talking about the Egyptians, that the Egyptians were trying to build an army, and because of the slave labor of the Hebrew slaves, the Egyptians become a major player. And I was that made me think of what it's happening in the pseudo cultures that in from the surface, from the outside, it looks like civilization, And when I say from the outside, it looks like civilization, because if you look at China, if you look at Dubai, from the outside, it looks, Dubai is not all bad. It's great. To build a civilization is not an easy thing. It takes a lot of effort, wisdom. So yes, Dubai, China is better than Africa. It's better than a lot of places in Africa. But when compared to what civilization is, it's still a far cry for me. So when I think about Egypt becoming a major player as a result of employing slave laborers, is what most of the pseudo countries like Dubai is literally, in a sense, using slave labor or enslaving these people and making enslaving as a good number of people and making them build these empires for them. You see, so it's coming at the expense of the suffering and the hard work, the grunt work, the avodah of people, not the malakha of people. So the Hebrews, the Israelites were without hope in Egypt, and they were forced to do back-breaking labor, avodah, every day without any hope for malacha work. We've talked about the difference between malacha and avodah in the previous teaching. And in spite of the harsh conditions that the Israelites were subjected to, Scripture says that they continued to grow in numbers, in families and friends. You might have missed that, but this is tremendously important, because one of the bulwarks that will protect you from the tyranny or the 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 vulnerability to become a slave to the systems of man, or the systems of the dark powers of the world, it's family. Family is such a powerful gift given to us by God. The ability to build a family, a marriage, and a family, and to have friends. If you're going to be free, and when we start talking about the blueprints in specific, when we start treating specific points about the blueprint to redemption and transcendence, we're going to look at family, we're going to look at friends, and we're going to look at how this plays a tremendous role in our redemption and transcendence. You know, the Hebrew word for family actually could be translated into English to mean an obligation to serve. In other words, family is the person you call any day, anytime, and they will be there to rescue you. That's family. They are the people that you can count on anytime to be there for you, and they'll be there for you. And as a result, you know, because this is when I say an obligation to serve, this is how the obligation works, that I am obligated to be there for my family when they need me. But the obligation doesn't work that your other family member feels like they are entitled for you to be there. So they don't stand there saying that you have an obligation to be there for me. No, that's not how it works. You see, because family can become toxic, family can become abusive. Just because somebody is your family member doesn't mean they're a good person. I mean, they're really, you could have a very destructive family member. I mean, you could even have a very destructive, toxic sibling. It happens. So as for all that family can be good, you got to build it for it to be good and helpful in redemption and transcendence. You got to build it using the design of the Creator. Friends, the Hebrew word for friends is yad yad, and yad yad translates to English hand hand. It's like hand, two hands. In other words, a person who has friends has more hands than just the person who is alone. So the word picture of a friend is actually two hands held together, yad yad. So Yoshua said something about friends, which is very important. That friends are if you make friends for times of trouble. He tells a story. Yoshua tells a story about a man that was skimming money from his master, a manager that was skimming money from his master's business. And then he realizes that his master is about to catch on to him. So he decides to forgive the debts of everybody that owes his master. Now Yeshua said that you got to make friends, and so that by the time you don't have home or you don't have means, these friends will welcome you and they will help you. You see, you and you don't want to go about this like a businessman. What I mean by like a businessman, it says you don't want to go about. There's a paradox in this, and the paradox is that you make friends for the sake of friendship. What do I mean? You don't become what could be termed a user. A user is someone who only associates with people and make friends with people that can be of value, that they can benefit or extract some benefit from them. So you say, but yes, why would I make friends to people that I don't benefit anything from? Now, this is the problem. When we say that we want to make friends from people that we want to benefit from, we are thinking only in terms of material perspective, materially. That is there money that I can get from this person? Maybe when I want to get a loan, is this someone I can borrow money from? Or get a loan from? Is it someone that can be of a relevant professional connection? Or is it just someone that it would be nice to say somewhere that I'm associated with a person and it will give me some social boost that can make people welcome me in circles that otherwise they wouldn't have opened their doors for me? Or whatever these reasons are that you want to connect with somebody. And the truth is that when you're this kind of person, you send out the vibe. People get to sense that there's something off-putting about you. There's a genuineness vibe that doesn't come out from you, that and the funny vibe that comes out from you instead repels people or makes people know who you are. And we will talk about this in detail. So what you want to do is that in the physical world, family is first of all predicated on blood. The people you call your family is predicated on that you have a blood relation, a physical blood relation with those people. Now, friends, which is of a higher spiritual level, and 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 if your family members don't become your friends, your family members have to become your friends, because if your family members are not your friends, it could easily become a toxic situation. And what is a friend? I mentioned that is yard yard, but what makes these two hands come together is because these two hands have the same purpose, the same values, and the same values, ethics, and morals. So you want to make friends with people because you have the same spiritual values. You have ethics because of their values, their character, their morals, because of who they are spiritually. When I say spiritually, I'm not speaking of it in a churchy sense. I mean spiritually in the sense of their character, their morals, their values, and their personality, their goodness. This is why you want to be friends with someone before any other benefits that might come as a result of that benefit, maybe a professional connection. You want to like somebody. I like my friends, those I consider my friends. I like them. As a matter of fact, it's hard for me to be friends with someone I don't like. And there are plenty of people I don't like who are uh, in terms of social proximity, are close to me that I could befriend them. And I like people based on their spiritual values. There are people that I really cherish their friendship, though there is nothing I can really think of that I might benefit from them materially. And only God knows that maybe one day they will be in a position that I might be in a position that they're the only ones who can offer me something I need. But our friendship is not predicated on that thing that I'm looking for, that I might need one day from this person. So that's the paradox there. You might want to, and when I say your family's got to become your friends, is that, and this is the thing about family, is that being a father or a mother, your job is to make sure that the scripture says that a good man leaves an inheritance for his children and his children's children. And this inheritance is not just physical. If you read that in the Hebrew, you see that this inheritance also has to do with the spiritual values, the principles, the legacy that a father passes on to his children. And children growing up in the same house under the tutelage of a father, because one of the main jobs of a father, even though today we've relegated the jobs to schools and to pastors, but the mandate to teach children the word of God It was given to fathers, not to the pastor, not to the priest. It was given to the parents to teach your children the values, the spiritual values of God, not your pastor, not anybody else, not the school. Children growing up under the tutelage, the mentorship of the same parents now have the same values and the same morals, the same outlook and the same worldview. And this is what makes them not just family bound together by blood, but it makes them a family bound together by common values and a shared vision and outlook of life. And this is what friends mean, people with a shared vision and outlook and values for life. And so you might have a sibling that both of you see the world in two different ways, you have completely opposite values and so on. You might find that a friend might be better off for you than even that sibling that you're related by blood. So you got to be born together, not just by materially by blood, but also spiritually by values, by spiritual values and so on. And these are the things, making friends, building a family. These are some of the things, the titanium bulwark, the fence that will protect you from the harsh, tyrannical machine of dark entities and the anointed rulers of the world. So Pharaoh was alarmed that, man, that we are oppressing these people. We've made them slaves, but they keep growing with friends and family. What is it? And he was alarmed. And so Pharaoh took immediate action and he implemented an ancient form of birth control, abortion. Now, children, and this is something we'll talk about when we talk about family. Having children is one of the most life affirming things you could ever do, and is one of the things that protects your soul from decaying. Does it mean that people who don't have children will not? That's not what I'm saying. Okay, this is so Pharaoh has to destroy the ability to build families and friendship, and he has to take from them one of the most life affirming things they could do, which is having children. The Hebrew, being a Hebrew, also means to be stubborn, and they kept having children and they kept breeding, and Pharaoh could not stop them. I mentioned that there is a machine, a social engineering that is going on by the anointed rulers of the world. And I'm using this word anointed in the context I've already mentioned, as from what Thomas Sowell said in the book, the social engineering to enslave the masses. Okay, now in America there is a pension or money that they give to single mothers. Now, if you're a single mother, you are entitled to government support. Now, but if you get married and you have a husband, you no longer receive any support from the government. Now, that seems wonderful, right? It seems like a wonderful thing to do. Now, so many people prefer not to get married so they can have government support, because two couples taking care of a child needs more help, still needs help. You understand these things. I don't need to tell you the realities that are out there. And you could be a single mother that you have a job that is paying, that your income is higher than a married couple, but you as a single mother with a job and an income that is higher than that of a married couple put together, you are entitled to government support. But that married couple, even though their income could be half yours, are not entitled to that government support. What does that tell you? That is putting an incentive on not getting married. But if you're not getting married, we'll help you. But if you get married, forget, you don't have any help. And so there are couples that decide to separate and live apart and divorce or something just so they could get government support. If I were a government official, this is what I would do. I would instead give help to married couples. And somebody say, but there are two of them. Bonfleet, what you're doing is cruel. There are two of them. I'm alone. Instead, you give them help. Yeah, because I'm insensitizing marriage. If you want government help, then get married. We'll help you. So, anyway. So my approach would seem cruel from a face value. It would seem cruel. It would seem like I'm helping the strong I think this is what part of the reason that Trump is hated, because it seems he's helping the strong and he's no friend of the weak. But if you look at it, ideas like subsidizing and helping single mothers is not helpful at the end of the day, because it destroys children, especially boy children who don't grow up with their fathers. It ends up in crime. It's not good for everyone at the end of the day. Okay, so let's continue. I thought let me mention that, so abortion, the Pharaoh implemented abortion to destroy these Hebrews, and he issued a decree that all male boys should be immediately aborted upon birth to stop the growth of the people, which he perceived as a threat to his nation and the power of his throne. And so I want to talk a little bit about birth control and how the creation of the birth control pill around 1960 changed the world, and how the indoctrination, and one of the most stupidest thing that anyone can say today, is that sex is just sex and it doesn't have any consequence, that there's no danger to sex. It's dangerous. Sex is a very dangerous thing, but there's an indoctrination that makes it look like it's just what it is. It's just two people having a good time, and they could just move and have a good time with the next person and the next person. Anyway, let's go ahead. Okay. I'm trying to focus. I think I've been very indisciplined today. I've been pursuing all kinds of rabbit holes here and there, and I've not followed the map I had in my mind for the things I want to share today. But hey, here on onwards, I'm going to try to be disciplined. Monthly, you be disciplined. Follow this blueprint. Now, so in the previous teaching, I also made a very profound statement, very, very profound statement. And I was very impressed that some of you cashed onto it, how profound it is. I said follow the rules, that don't try to build your life based on the exception. You build your life based on the rules, what is normal. And that is such a very complicated thing to say also, because if and I'm sure also you saw the complication in it, because in the world it seems that to achieve anything worthwhile you got to break rules. Okay, let's take for instance the people who developed the airplane, the Wright brothers, and one of the criticisms that were given to them at the time was that if God made human beings to fly, he would have given them wings. So your plane is not going to work because God doesn't want human beings flying around. But these brothers break the rules. So if these brothers took my advice on a face value, it would seem that we'll never have an airplane. That's what my advice seems like, on face value. Look at the electricity, everything that has significantly improved the well-being of human being and created wealth. All these things happen because people break the rules. So what exactly do I mean by follow the rules? Which rules do you know to break? Which rules do you know to follow? You see, if the Wright brothers met me like a sage and they said, Monthly, do you think it fits in God's design that we should develop an airplane that defies the law of gravity and defies so many laws of creation just to fly? Do you think this fits into God's design to do that? And I'll say yes. And how would I know? How do I know that the answer is yes? You know that there's an experiment that Russian scientists they're trying to do. They are trying to cross Ebola and with this other deadly virus. I think Ebola and cold. Ebola and cold. If Ebola is very deadly, very lethal, and the common cold is very contagious. Until they believe if you bring a virus that is very lethal with a virus that is highly contagious and you mush them together, you have the very deadly virus that is highly lethal and contagious. Now, if they came and asked me that, honestly, does it fit God's design for us to do something like this? I say, no, it doesn't. And how would I know it doesn't? See, we're going to discuss this in the next segment. We'll take off from here in the next segment. I'm going to talk about what exactly I meant by follow the rules. What rules? Because in a world where it seems that for you to do anything significant with your life is to break the rules, in a world where rules continue to change, where we begin to show that the rules of gravity was not the end or be all, there were so many other laws in operation too that we could enable us to build an airplane that a massive piece of iron flies in the sky. In a world where things continue to change, we have to find an anchor on things that never change. And when I say follow the rules, I mean follow, anchor yourself on the things that never change. It is only when you discover these things that never change and anchor yourself on it, it becomes a fulcrum. As Archimedes said, that give me a solid place to stand on, a solid, a firm fulcrum to hold, and I will move the world. If you find the fulcrum, the permanent principles of the world that never change and will never change, and you anchor yourself on them, then you can go on breaking all the other rules and changing all the other rules, and you can fly and you can move the world. You can build airplanes, you can build electricity, you can build things that are miraculous if you really think about it. And this is what we're going to talk about in the next segment. We're going to talk about the rules, and we're going to talk about so many things else. In what I've been able to discuss today is just like one page of the map I had in my mind. I didn't know it was going to take this long. It's because I've been very indisciplined pursuing all kinds of rabbit trails. I've barely touched the introduction. This what I've said today was just to take me 10 minutes at most, as I imagine, and then I was going to move into the things that I had in mind to share with us today. But so far, I've only barely scratched. I'm still commenting on the things we talked about in the previous lecture, which I thought was going to take about 10 minutes, and I have not even through, because I'm still now to talk about the statement I made about following the rules and building your life on the normal and not the exception. And I think that in the next segment, this thing is going to take me about 10 minutes to talk about before I move into the things that I thought we were going to share today. So you're going to have to forgive me for that. However, I pray that you bless these words that I have shared with your people, with your children, with these precious divine beings that you created, these wonderful, creative, powerful beings that you created and put on the earth to be productive and to pursue a vital part of your design and your purpose. I pray that you pour your blessing and your light upon them, and that you fill their minds with joy, and with the joy of creativity, with the joy of inspiration, and that you fill their spirit with healing and health and life. In the name of Yeshua. Amen. Okay, so do share this with your friends, share this lecture with your friends. And I'm also, there's something that I think you really want to hear. If this lecture felt like an anticlimax, if this teaching felt like an anticlimax, I want you to come in the next segment, because there's something really important I'm going to say. Because sometimes in life we are pursuing a vision from God. Like I said, that you hold, if you have a divine vision, you hold that vision in your heart, and no matter how it seems impossible, incredible, you pursue that vision, and the world would change and adapt, and give room for your vision. But there's something that is said that doing the same thing over and over is the definition, and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. And so sometimes it seems that you have to be persistent to pursue the vision of God, or the vision that God has put in your heart, or the inspiration that you have in your heart, but it keeps failing. It's like you're in this long period of avodah and nothing ever breaks into malacha. Now, how do you know when you've moved into from wholesome avodah or wholesome persistence into insanity, where you keep doing the same thing over and over? How do you know when to stop? How do you know when to change, or to continuously be persistent, and for things to break up into malakha? Because there's another quote that says that a lot of people give up when they were just 99%, when there was just 1% left for their malakha or their result or their breakthrough, and they gave up because they had been toiling for 99 times, 99% so long, and no malakha, no fruits, no results, and they gave up thinking they would never give any fruits, but they were just 1% away from the finish mark. And then there are people who might waste the whole of their lives pursuing a work that at the end of the day never really brings any fruit. And then they only realize when it's too late that, well, I've wasted my time and I've wasted my life. This thing was a lost cause. How do you tell the difference? And there's an amazing blueprint in Numbers chapter 22 that I'm going to show to you, which will help you tell the difference when it's time to stop, to change direction, or to persist and continue. And a miracle, the sea will split, like the case of Action Ibn Aminadab we discussed last segment. So please come back. You need to hear this, because I need to say this, because it embellishes and brings more context, more meat to something I said in the previous teachings. Blessed in the name of Hashem. See you in the next segment.